Hey guys, in this video, you're going to learn how to perform automated CI/CD testing in Microsoft Playwright in a React application. So I'm aware that Playwright already has some documentation on how you can perform automated testing in GitHub Actions, but this video will serve as a guide for people who prefer a more visual guide, or for those who want to just see how things work before actually trying it out. So let's get started. We first have to build a blank React application, but one thing to remember is that Playwright officially supports Ubuntu and Debian-based distributions. Since I'm running Fedora, I'll default to using a Distrobox container. Luckily, someone has already created a guide for us on how to run an Ubuntu container so that we could run Playwright. So I'll just follow the instructions here. I already have Distrobox installed. To create a blank Ubuntu container, I can simply go Distrobox, create, -test name, then I call it testing tutorial, and then my image should be an Ubuntu image. I'll do root, and then I'll copy this flag, which makes sure that I have root permissions in this container, and then hit enter. Now that my container has been created, let's head to VS Code. So I have a blank project. Here, I'll use Vite to create a blank React application. So I can simply go npm create Vite at latest. Then I'll do dot, so I want my project to be built in this folder. I'll choose React and then TypeScript. Next, I just do npm install. So earlier, recall that I mentioned that Playwright does not support other than Debian and Ubuntu based distros. Since I'm running Fedora, I'll just have to go into my Distrobox Ubuntu container. So Distrobox and then the name of my container, which was testing tutorial, which should be enter, and then as root. Now let's wait for a container to initialize. Okay, so now my container is now running. Within my container, I can simply install Playwright via npm init playwright at latest. Yes, we'll call our folder tests. And since this video mentions we want to create a GitHub Actions workflow, I do y as yes, and then here I'll choose true. This is preferred. This is how it will run our headful or UI tests. Here I'll choose yes, since Ubuntu requires specific dependencies for Playwright to run. Now let's wait for it to install. So now we're done here. So according to the console, it has already created an example test for us, as you can see. Let's try running this test. To run this test, I can simply go npx playwright test and then enter. Now, according to console, we have 6 tests and they've all passed. All these tests do is it checks if a certain page has a title and a few links. That's it. And earlier, remember that we mentioned that we have a working GitHub Actions workflow. Let's look through the .github file, playwright.yml, and let's try to read this file. So from lines 2 to 6, essentially this workflow says that I want my test to run on the main and the master branch, and along with every pull request towards the main and the master branch. Line 12 clones the repository. Line 13 installs and sets up Node.js for us. Lines 16 to 19 install all of our Playwright related dependencies along with the dependencies of the project. Lines 20 to 21 run the Playwright test, and lines 22 to 27 upload our results as an artifact on GitHub. Let's now try seeing this in action. I want to try uploading this repository to Git. So for my repository, I can go git init and then git add and then git commit -m complete project. So here I've set up a little blank repository on GitHub. Let's try uploading this repository. So I'll just click this command and then paste it within my terminal window. Now that it has been uploaded, let's head back to GitHub. So now that my project has been uploaded, I can go to Actions and then it's automatically running. So if I click on complete project, this commit here, and then within my test, so according to GitHub, my automated testing process is already running. Let's wait for it to run. Since this playwright.yml file also mentions that we can perform testing on our pull request, let's try creating a pull request. So I'll create a blank branch. Let's call it testing-branch, and then I'll make a little commit here. So I'll basically remove all of this, and then I can write a hello world here, and then I can remove all the unneeded variables and everything. Okay, let's try making a pull request. So git add, and then I'll make a commit called remove unneeded code, and then git push. Sorry, I have to upload it. I have to publish it. Let's head back to the browser where we can see if this testing is running in GitHub Actions. So if I go to pull request, and then I can do a compare and pull request button, and then I can click on create pull request. So as soon as I do a pull request, GitHub automatically runs this test for us. Let's write a little test for this application. I want my application to contain a button that when clicked should increment a counter. So first I'll create a counter variable. So const count set count useState, and then I'll import my useState. Next, I want to have a button. So button on click. When the button is clicked, it can increment the counter, increment button. Then I can have a count variable being displayed. I want to try running this application before we can upload it to GitHub. So npm run dev. So I have localhost. And then if I click on it, now within my browser, if you see increment, and as soon as I click on the increment button, the count variable updates as well. Now that I have a small application, let's try writing a test for this. So since mentioned earlier, all of our tests will be stored in the test folder. So here I'll create another file called button.spec.ts. So let's create a small test. So import test, and then expect from playwright test, and then I'll create my test scenario. So test, clicking on the button increments the count variable, and then we want to go to the home page. So await page.go-to, which is the index directory. So the next step, now that my script has gone to the home directory, I want to click on my button. But here's the catch. How do we identify this button? Well, for this, we have to create a test ID identifier. So go back to app.tsx and then data-test ID, and then we'll call it increment. So now that we have an identifier for this button, I can simply go await page.getByTest ID increment, and then click on that button. So when the script clicks on this button the first time, we expect this text to contain 1. So for example, in this case, it's going to be count is 1. So this should be the expected text. But for here, I would also need a test ID or an identifier. So data-test ID, and let's call it count value. Let's go back and then await. So we need an expect function. So it should expect our page.getByTestID count value to have text count 1. So essentially in this little script, I'm saying that we want playwright to go to the home directory, find the button that has the test ID of increment, so which is this button, and then click it. When it's been clicked, we expect the element with this test ID, in this case it's this paragraph, to have the text count as 1. Let's try running this test. So I'll basically close my application, and then I can do npx playwright test. So as soon as I run this test, notice that some of my tests are failing. This is because it can't go to the home directory. We need to fix this. To fix this, let's go to the config file. So in this case, it's playwright.config.ts, and then I scroll down to base URL. So this basically says this will be my home directory. In this case, it was 5173. This is my home directory, but we're not done yet. We now need to tell Playwright to automatically start the server every time we run this test. So scrolling down, we can go to this web server, and then I'll uncomment it. So my command should be npm run dev in this case. So run the dev server. Again, my URL should be 5173. Okay, now this looks good. Now let's try running this test once again. So npx playwright test. So notice that now all of our tests are passing. Let's now upload this branch once again to Git, or update this branch in Git. So git add did. Oops, looks like I have to run it on the host machine. So git add, git commit, add another test, and then simply git push. Let's now head back to GitHub. So within pull request, I click here again. Let's wait for it to run the CI/CD pipeline. So one thing while running the test, notice that all of our tests, our 9 tests, are now passing. So if I go back to my repository and then within my pull request, if I merge it, I expect this automated test to run once again. Cool. So since we mentioned earlier, this test will also run on every commit within the main or the master branch. Okay, so notice that within my main branch, all of my tests are passing here as well. That's it for today. So in this video, you'll learn how to set up an automated CI/CD process or a CI/CD pipeline. And within that pipeline, you learned how to run automated playwright tests in a React application. That's it for today. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Till then, have a great day and bye bye.